original motivation was, a common operation may be in this function, I want to make sure all the input lists have the same length. And so you effectively end up saying, apply same queue onto a map of the list. And I think it was one of those sort of shortcut functions that people write occasionally.
Let's not worry about it. I think it's not. I think it's obscure for all the reasons you said. Okay, flattened.
Yes, so finally I discussed again with Tai, and yes, his concerns were on the two arguments form.
Here?
No, he's not here, but I know what he what he says. So the problem is in this two arguments form, because we were thinking of having a one argument form, which is basically the version of nothing for an argument for a list of arguments, and then having a second argument specifying the head it splices into.
Yep.
And that's the case that can become problematic if that head has hold attributes. Because this
I don't disagree. I mean, I think the most important case is the list case, which is the same as nothing. Nothing is something that works in lists, but not in other things. And I think it will be perfectly good to be able to say, so now the complaint is the past tense of flattened there.
Yes, we were discussing the name again. Yeah, this is a to be flattened somehow.
Yeah, to be flattened, right. And in languages other than English, there's probably some form that is an immediate to be flattened. Look, in this case with nothing, you're replacing, X with nothing, for example. You say, I want to put in the list XY, which will be, this is kind of auto-flattening. It's kind of the full name, I would think.
Okay.
I don't like that. I don't like auto-flattening. I think it's a ponderous name. And what are we going to call it? We could talk about names like splice, but I think flatten is a better name. I think flatten is the name that we are traditionally using. This goes along with flatten at. This is delete, basically, is the analog. Delete is to nothing as flatten at is to what? So delete. See, that's why we ended up with flattened, because flattened is like the outcome. But I agree that the outcome hasn't happened yet. So nothing is, to put it sillily, is something that becomes nothing, so to speak. Am I making sense? So this thing is something that becomes just the elements. Right?
I see. I see your point that nothing has the same to be done.
Yeah, right. So this becomes the elements. So really what we want to represent is that this is let's write what we would write about flattened. Okay, we'd say flattened of list of x1, x2, x3, e1, e2, e3. Represents, what do we say for nothing? I see. Well, it's basically is automatically replaced by the sequence of elements E1, E2, whenever it appears in a list. Right, that's what it really is. Which makes the name flattened pretty obscure, given that that's the...
Yes, because we don't use the verb flatten in that.
Well, now, of course, obscurely enough, okay, so sequence doesn't do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the word which would often be used for this is something like inline. Represents a sequence of elements that I mean, this is the clearer description of what it actually does.
Something like sequence list?
I don't want to use something with sequence because what would sequence list? I mean, inline is really obscure. I wonder if there's something that can be done that's analogous to nothing. Because really what this is, okay, well, let's write down what some of the sentiments are. Elements only. That's horrible.
Well, this is like a version of nothing for heads. It's like head nothing.
Okay, no head.
Headless.
I think that's really obscure. Amusing but not useful, listless. Also unusable, unlisted. How about inserted? Okay, represents a sequence of elements that should be automatically inserted into a list. Look, the way it's going to be done, I mean, a common thing will be something like A, X, B, X, C, / dot X arrow, something there. Right?
Yep.
So, I mean, that looks quite beautiful. Okay, so something like this. I mean, we have the absurd function splice from a million. Oh, we don't. Did we de-document splice?
This is quite old.
What, splice?
Splice. Yeah.
It's very old. It's version 1.
I see. I think I've never used this function.
Sandra is asking, does the function splice still exist? It appears to, but it's been long since deprecated. So I have to say, I think we could reuse the splice term. I cannot parse this name, but NJP. Oh, NJ pipe organ. I got it. Flattened is at flatten. Apply sequence to flatten. Yes, it is. It's I see that Sandra is suggesting knit. The problem is that these things are so frigging obscure. If you see them in a piece of code like this, you know, knit is just like, what the heck is that? I mean, nothing is so nice compared to that. Sequence isn't really usable because, well, A, because it means something different in our language, but B, because it's really, what it's doing is, oh, look, what about something like unwrap? Or unwrapped? It's kind of obscure. I mean, I don't think that's any better than the flattened case.
Yeah.
Sandra is saying splice is the best option, but I don't think, the problem is splice suggests it will actively do something, whereas what this is doing is, if it was going to be something like that, it would be spliced, which I don't really like, because it's kind of like, it suggests that this thing here, should it be ED or should it be ING? Of course, nothing ends in ING, but for somewhat different reasons. Flattened, flattening. Look, the reason that we thought about flattened, I don't think flattened is totally stupid out of these, because it is analogous to flatten at. Gosh, it isn't right, because flatten suggests a looking down in the subtree.
Exactly, yeah. You need to go like 2 levels up to put a flatten.
Yeah, right. Okay, so, I mean, I don't think it is a beautiful word, but auto-splicing. Spliced. Okay, so this.
Coming back to the idea of headless, are there any synonym of
headless?
Yes, that could be useful here.
I mean, anything to do with heads is always somehow utterly obscure. Headless ABC, that doesn't seem very convincing. I mean, people, yeah, inline is just not a term that we use. What is it really doing? It's taking these parts. Insert wouldn't do this.
Right. Once we have inserted it, inserted is fine. But in this rule, we are not inserting, we are replacing. So
Yeah, but also that isn't right, because insert just does, I think if we do this, for example, does that work? No, it doesn't even work.
No, it doesn't have this notation yet.
Ah, we probably should give it that notation. Yeah, well, that does something completely different. Completely, utterly different. Completely not what we... Okay. Well, okay. Well, actually, what about... Two suggestions here are splice in and interlace. The problem with these things, so interlaced... Oh, what? Interlaced is already a thing for some weird stuff with images, but that is actually, in a sense, a better concept, because it is interpolated. It is interlaced. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. There is a great name out there for this. There's a name that's so obvious, like the name nothing took a while to come up with, as I recall.
Along the same lines as interlaced, maybe interwoven.
I think that gets way too whimsical. Yeah. I think we're off with knitting needles at this point.
There's probably some weave analogy too, but
right. But what is it that is happening? This thing is kind of exploding its listfulness upon, its upon arrival, so to speak. Another totally weird word: auto-unlisting. Hopeless, 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 hopeless.
In the same way of inline, is there any in list?
That is way too punny. It's kind of nice, but it's way too punny. It is, in a sense, what's happening. It's unlisting, but in a different sense of unlisting, delisting.
I was thinking of in list, like in line.
Yeah, I understand. I just don't get that. I don't see how to do it. I don't see a word for that. Look, the metaphor that we have, okay, auto-flattening, would that be even the right term? If it was called auto-flattening, would that say the right thing? No, not really, because it's not flattening. It's auto... Yeah, look, the thing that is closest to being the right thing is probably auto-splicing. But it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing because of the fact that it is, okay, this object is an auto-splicing thing. Not really. What is this? As a noun, what is this thing? Okay, so Sandra is suggesting a number of extremely dental possibilities. His first one is inlay. A subsequent one is implant. The problem is these feel too heavy. Inlay is, well, inlay is amusing. It's inlay. This just looks so obscure, though. If you saw that in a piece of code, it's like, what the heck is that? Injecting. It feels so technical. I mean, it feels that that's some kind of, bijection or something in some weird mathematical sense. And it feels too much like there's a lot of action going on, injecting. It's like you're forcibly, putting the whatever it is into the yeah, it's pointing out that it's an operation in a tree that repeatedly replaces a node with its children. That is correct. That is what it does. Inject and fuse, Sandra is suggesting. Oh, naming is hard. Okay. Any more ideas here right now?
It's not exactly right, but I was thinking sort of along the line of stuff. Not like stuff as in a noun, but as a verb.
Like stuffing. The problem is then we're going to go turkey. We're going to go full turkey here.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not inserting or embedding necessarily. It's a package.
See, all of these names, like embedding and so on, they're too fancy a word. This needs to be something banal and simple, like nothing is. Either that or it has to say what it's doing with incredible explicitness, like auto something or other. I mean, really, what it really is something that's not there. Well, actually, it's worse than that. It unpeels. What it really is it's removing the list. That's a way to think about it. By the way, we've got a weird background noise here. Sounds actually a little bit, that is way too whimsical, but the concept is right. Pop in. I don't know what that's, as in Mary or as in type of flower, or no, it's a thing that pops into place. It explodes on contact. I don't think in modern times we really want something like exploding here. Pairing, as in P-A-R. Yeah, it's too weird. Too weird. People, I mean, listen, this is the right concept. Yeah, Sandra is suggesting remove curly brackets. Yeah, well, yep. I mean, it is. It's delisted somehow.
Unfurl?
Unfurl. Oh, God. I mean, unfortunately, something like that just sounds way too general. I think we're on sort of the better track here, without list, unpeeled, those kinds of things. Because that's really what it's doing, right? It's taking this thing. This is a stupid one. That's incomprehensible again. Absolutely incomprehensible. Yeah, peeling. The problem if you say peeling, it's like the thing is peeling, like the paint is peeling off, so to speak. It's not that it will, what it really wants to be. This, like nothing, represents nothing. This represents the unpeeled version of ABC, which can then be spliced into there. I mean, there are words, but they're very obscure and whimsical. I mean, things like exposed or how about list removed? It's too clunky.
Something that explicitly mentions list has the advantage of being more to the point.
Yes.
Of not suggesting that this is going to work like sequence anywhere.
Right.
But this is different from sequence in operation?
Well, yeah, because it is taking out that list and stuffing, as people have mentioned, the thing into those pieces. Yeah, I thought about unlisted with it's too weird. It's just too weird because unlisted is like, the company is being delisted, unlisted, whatever. It's an unlisted number, it's just there are too many connotations, I think, that unlisted has in the world at large. What's a synonym for without? List.
There's always sans.
That's way too weird. Yeah, we could go. I'm losing my mind. What language is so? That's French, right? Yeah, French. Okay, so somebody is asking, what is the original problem? The original problem, just so we're explaining it, is we want a function. We have a function called nothing, a thing called nothing, which if you replace an element of a list by nothing, then the nothing just disappears in the list. What we are trying to do is to have something where if you replace this X by some wrapper of some list, that the elements of that list, that what this will turn into is simply A, D, E, F, B, D, E, F, C. So it is as if X is being replaced by the unwrapped version.
That isn't the same as using sequence?
No, because sequence would be, look, to do it with sequence, doing it with sequence has all kinds of semantic issues. I hate sequence. I've been trying to kill sequence since it existed in SMP in 1980. It is the most semantically horrifying thing. In fact, I bet you don't even know what this is going to do, because you don't know whether sequence is going to splice itself into the rule object. Well, it actually did the right thing in this case, but probably only because rule specifically makes itself not.
You'd use rule delayed if you had to.
Well, rule and rule delayed are sequence hold, but there are many other functions like if. For example, people complain that they cannot propagate sequence objects through ifs, when nothing propagates very nicely through ifs.
Yeah, the whole point is that nothing is a very controlled thing because it only removes itself from lists. Actually, someone here is suggesting no list, which is an obviously interesting and simple suggestion. Not really quite consistent with some of our naming conventions, but interesting. I mean, that is definitely... The trouble is, if you saw that in a piece of code, it's just kind of, what the heck is it? Decapitate. Yeah, well, actually, decapitated. Decapitated is more the sentiment, which is similar to the without head concept, which we were going for before. All right, what's the best of what we have here?
Kind of like inlay or maybe in splice.
But look, I see. It is an inlay, is your claim. X is the inlay. Well, let's try and write the text if it was inlay. Okay?
My worry with that is that we have overlay, which is so different.
What even is overlay? Oh, yeah. Right.
It's an image related.
It's different. It's a thing for images. Well, but well, okay. So there's other weird constructions like spliced in.
It certainly conveys the meaning.
It does convey the meaning. Yeah, actually, into is an interesting thing being suggested on the live stream here, that something spliced into. No, actually, into isn't right because this is spliced in. How about flattened in?
I don't see the need of the in. So why is
no, because flattened in is the whole point is this thing is a flattened in object. Look, we can say represents a sequence of elements that automatically, well, what we would say is flattened into that automatically, no, it's not really right. All right, listen, I'm kind of thinking that's the least horrible thing someone is suggesting on this live stream. Just make it a vote. No, democracy doesn't work for things like this. That's my conclusion for the last 40 years of designing software. So,
we're treating this thing as an inert sequence. Could call it that.
That is obscure beyond belief because it requires a knowledge of. I mean, that's kind of like that's one of those terms that where you have to know the history of the whole thing. All right, listen. I think flattened in is what we should go ahead and implement it with. We will come back to this naming thing, and hopefully, as we try and, it's a little weird. It's a little weird, and I think there is a great name, and we don't have it yet. Further thought. Okay, let's go on to the next item. Oops. Output formatting of factor integer.
Yes, so this is a suggestion coming from Michael, and he would like to have a way of typesetting this in a with.
Yeah, I know. Basis. I mean, this is a kind of an ugly form, but the question is, you know, really what we want is some kind of factor form.
Okay.
Where the only point is the typesetting, right? Where it's 2 to the 1 times. Why? Wow, that doesn't produce a times sign. I'm surprised. Times. Okay, but now in Michael's theory of the world, this thing would auto-evaluate. Yes, I mean, in other words, well, clearly, if I actually enter that, it'll evaluate. So is his theory that this thing that, you know, / factor form would produce this? Well, okay, is this what is his idea?
Well, he wants something mainly for typesetting, but I guess once it is one of these form things, it will be accepted in any other function that takes a factor integer structure. And we have also unit dimensions, which is something we have also discussed sometimes, that it has basically the same structure. It's pairs.
Yeah, I understand. So what happens if I say unit dimensions of miles per hour? Yes.
So factor form could also be able to represent this in a nicer way.
Are you saying, Jose, that the head should or should not disappear, in the sense that matrix form's head does not disappear?
I think its head probably can't disappear.
Right.
Okay, so it will maintain its form, its look, and will not evaluate without getting rid of the head.
Yeah, right. But I mean, the fact is that by the way, somebody is commenting that we should have been using. We haven't actually put in synonyms, have we? It's still just word data of, for example, inlay, comma, synonyms. Particularly if it can load its data in. Come on. Yeah, great. It's a decoration, it's a filling, terrific. Let's just try the one or two other things that we had. Splice.
Well, fill in could be used in that setting.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a lot of these meanings I should have, yeah, great. Tie or wed, also not very useful. Okay, onward. Okay, so the issue here, this is something that would operate somewhat like matrix form, right? In the sense that it is doing that so that percent remains that.
Right.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. Is it factor form or factored form? I think factor form is probably, I mean, really what this is, what's another example of this where one could use it? I mean, one could say if one had mantissa exponent of, something or another. Oh, great. Not what we wanted. Something like that. No, that's not the same thing.
No, it needs a
The other factor, though, the polynomial factoring functions could use it.
But in what way? I mean, they already have that.
Well, I guess, yeah, they're
already getting it in the right form. Because it's symbolic. I mean, the issue here is that because we can't, if we were to present it, in the case of polynomials, because we're not auto-expanding, we can just present the factors as we present them. The issue here is that it would auto-expand. And so we have to present the factors in this way. I think factor form that just produces this, and basically it's a very simple creature. It just takes lists of pairs, and in this particular case, it would say length unit to the 1, time unit to the -1.
Right.
And the traditional form, does this have an interesting traditional form? What is it? We don't have Michael here, do we? No, we don't. That looks truly awful. Oh, of course it can't know, right? I mean, but the traditional form of the factor form could be something perfectly nice. But what is the correct way to represent a quotes length unit? It's usually just with an L, right? L to the 1, T to the -1. So that's probably what the traditional form of that should be. What is that thing anyway? What is length unit? Is it a symbol?
No, it's a string.
It's a string, yeah.
That's kind of grotesque. Why isn't it an entity?
The short answer is we built the unit system before the entity system existed, but I'm not sure. I mean, I guess there could be a physical dimension entity domain.
I would think so. I mean, why isn't this directly analogous? I mean, that's a length unit. That's a generic length unit, just like meters is a specific length unit. Am I making sense? Which is itself an entity. No, it's not an entity there.
This may also be connected with the physical quantities that we also name
what?
via.
Like
quantity variables.
Quantity variables, yes.
Like magnetic flux or something.
Right.
Okay, I think we need Michael and the rest of that team to actually have a meaningful discussion about this. Do you know if this has an interesting traditional form?
I don't think it does.
It probably should have. All right. Can we look? I think factor form sounds good, but can we put a separate discussion on the books for talking about what we do with length unit and so on? Okay. I admit that this, because meters appears essentially in a string inside the quantity object, it's hard to argue that that should be an entity there. I'm sure Michael has thought about this. Okay, should we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Make geo-elevation data closer to geo-image. Is that
yes.
That's the world not upside down. Okay. Yep.
So this links to a suggestion of yours of adding geo-range, etc., to geo-elevation data. So thinking about that, and because of recent work on extending geo-image, so my point of view is that we could consider that geo-elevation data is an array of data, which is the image data of an image. And then everything that we can do to images, we can do to these arrays.
Yes. Okay. So like what?
Like, for example, we have in GeoImage, we have GeoProjection, we have GeoRange and GeoCenter, and various options that we don't yet have in GeoElevation data. But probably it would be easy to reuse all that code that can manipulate.
So, I mean, for example, GeoProjection is an interesting option for GeoElevation data. Because in this case, for example, it will really affect the structure of, but what happens if you say geoprojection? So, okay, let's just, to be clear what we're talking about. If we say geographics, georange, all geoprojection, arrow, I don't know what, Lambert azimuthal or something, then what we will have is a world, that's hardly the shape of an image.
Yes, so that's the question at the end that I wanted to discuss with you. What do we do with these background points? So in images, in GeoImage, GeoImage doesn't have it yet, but it's going to have now a background option that you can say red, and then this appears red.
Yeah, I understand that. But so let's walk through a little bit. Okay,
yeah.
So GeoImage. So if I were to do this same thing here for GeoImage, are you telling me that GeoImage would produce a Lambert azimuthal? Wow, it does. That's pretty cool. How does that work? I mean, you're doing the deformation. You're doing essentially the image geometric transformation to make the thing that projection. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that works. That's the same way we're doing it for the background tiles for a map. Is that true?
Exactly.
Does the North Pole actually? Oh, I guess the ice is just considered melted there. Okay, but that's nice. There's no discontinuity at the South Pole or anything like that. How did you achieve that?
Well, there is a little blue circle there because the actual thing comes from Mercator tiles sometimes, and then we interpolate the colors a bit to imitate, because we know there is nothing in that little circle.
Where? At the South Pole?
And at the North Pole as well.
What do you mean there's nothing at the South Pole? I know there's an actual pole at the South Pole.
Yes, but if we go to our images in equirectangular, etc., it's basically right.
So what happens if I say, I'm just going to look at this, if I say South Pole, it's not very nice. Why did that not have the geographic object, geoposition of South Pole? What is the geoposition of the South Pole?
That's going to be converted into geoposition of minus 19.0.
Okay, but so if I go, the geoposition of the South Pole, let's say I say georange arrow 10 miles. Is this going to give complete garbage?
Well, it depends on the projection, because this is, yes.
That looks like a bug to me.
Well, the problem here is that it's trying to get Mercator tiles. There are not, and it cannot do anything there.
How far do I have to go before it can get any?
It's 5 degrees, so how much is that?
What the heck is that?
This is Mercator. Use geoprojection goes to, Lambert azimuthal again. So geographics
Where's
is
the South Pole here.
It's not there because this in Mercator tiles we don't have them.
It doesn't go that far.
Exactly. Mercator tiles go up to 85 degrees.
Oh, so what do we do beyond that?
We just put some constant color.
Oh, can't we get Surely somebody has photographed the poles. Can't we get that? That's kind of embarrassing.
It's the original tiles we use for satellite are Mercator tiles, so we don't have that information. While, for example, the tiles we create for street maps, etc., that we create ourselves from OSM, we do go to the poles.
Okay, so if I do this, okay, so you're telling me if I were to do this, and I were to say, instead of GeoImage, I would say geographics here.
Yes, or for example, in GeoImage, try the second argument relief map.
GeoImage? Well, wait a minute, what happened here? So this is, there aren't any streets there.
Exactly, yes. But try GeoBackground goes to relief map. It's kind of
disappointing that nobody's put the South Pole Station into OSM. Maybe somebody should do that. Anybody want to send email to Steve Coast and suggest that somebody does that? Can we do that?
We can, yes, we will.
Okay. But in any case, but if I go much closer into the South Pole, well, maybe it's just not visible. If I go 10 miles from the South Pole or something here, you're telling me, what the heck is that?
It's just it's cutting an image in the rectangular projection and then projecting it. Try instead GeoBackground goes to relief map.
In here?
Yes. Because then there is structure there. We have elevation data up to the poles.
That is totally weird.
It's still too small. Yeah.
Because what? Because that is totally weird.
These are basically pixels in a rectangle.
Observe that they would decide that aliens have visited the South Pole.
But I just wanted you to see some structure.
What is all of that? Is that because of boundaries of tile boundaries or something? The projections of tile boundaries?
Yes, I think so.
It's interesting. So if we do the same thing, okay, that's better. If we were to do the same thing here, what is the way geoposition? What happens if we do this on the moon? Are we again using Mercator tiles on the moon?
Well, if relief map, we do have data of relief map, so it's going to happen something. So,
is that right?
Yes, I think so.
It's rather embarrassing, I'd say. Wow. Well, it's kind of embarrassing that our own planet isn't properly, we don't have good data. Well, what happens if I zoom in on the lunar South Pole?
Yes, so 500 miles on the moon mean...
Yeah, it's a long way.
Exactly.
Because the moon is smaller.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's still not embarrassing. I mean, I understand that those aren't, it's slightly digital, but those are still not. Now, what happens if I do this with a Mercator? What just happened there? Do you understand that? That's asking for it in GeoProjection.
Yes, because Geographics chooses the appropriate projection, while GeoImage selects Mercator by default.
Oh, I see. Geographics is allowed to choose the projection.
Exactly.
So if I said GeoImage here, and then I don't get to have a geo background.
Exactly. You need that claim in the second argument.
I don't even know what this possibly could be. What is that? That's a big mess. I mean, that's some yes. projection on the moon.
It's Mercator projection trying to do something at the pole, but the poles are mapped to infinity in Mercator projection. So the poles are really terrible in Mercator projection.
Right. So it's seeing, but in fact, we have the data. These tiles are not purely Mercator tiles. Is that a true statement on the moon?
Exactly, because these are generated via relief plot from elevation data. Now the problem is that we first do the relief plot in equirectangular and then project. That's why this looks pixelated. if we had the ability of having geoprojection in geoelevation data itself, it would return the geoelevation.
Right. So what you're telling me is that the geoelevation data is in lat-long bins.
Always, exactly.
Whereas the geoimage is not in lat-long bins. It's in Mercator, which is kind of screwy. It's in Mercator bins, so to speak.
Yes, but a geoimage has geoprojection option, so it can change if needed, while geoelevation data cannot change.
I understand. But what you're saying is, so if I look at geoimage of this, right, what you're saying is that the background pixels here are just white.
Exactly.
Right? So the question is, what's the analog of that in geoelevation data? Is it to say that I think that the background pixels have to be missing. I mean, the background has to be missing.
But the idea of the background option allows to specify a color, which is very nice because you can still keep the full array of data in the image packed. And we want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? So my suggestion would be to create an option that allows us to specify a value. And then the user has to say, oh, if I find this value, it means there was a value of elevation data.
Blah.
So it's kind of setting a floor.
Yeah. Blah. I mean, that seems kind of a hack. It seems like what the main issue here, this is a hack because we can't pack missings.
Yes, but even, for example, imagine the visualization, we still need to put something there.
Well, but missing can render however we choose to make it render. But let me just zoom out for a second to the whole issue here. So the main issue is geoelevation data is right now in equirectangular lat-long bins. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the question is, should you be able to get it in non-lat-long bins? Just as in the case of, if you say, I want my image, I want my field, and I mean that agriculturally in some sense, to be, I don't know how fields are actually drawn. They're probably not, I don't know if they're drawn in lat-long bins. Actually, I know that they are in some places. Never mind, that's a stupid analogy. Okay, but my point is, if you want to know this region, like, for example, in the South Pole case, clearly, okay, the South Pole case, were we to have equirectangular image tiles, then we would have a beautiful South Pole, right?
Not really, because the pole is aligned in equirectangular, so it's always difficult to convert it into a point.
But even epsilon away from the pole, we're still okay, right? It's only there's a discontinuity at the pole itself. At
the pole, yes.
But epsilon away, we're still, if we had equirectangular, okay, so what does it do in the case of geoelevation data? What happens if I say geoelevation data of the South Pole? What does it say? That would be geoposition of minus 90, 0. Actually, I have no idea what the elevation of the South Pole is. Okay, well, that's good. What does it do if it's plus 90, the North Pole? What? Oh, that's the ocean. That's the Arctic Ocean. That's a little weird, by the way. We don't have any option to give the what the actual ice surface is. Don't tell me it's changing. I know that.
No, we have fixed data.
But the measurement, like the radar measurements from the shuttle, must be the ice surface, not. I mean, this is bathymetry data taken by some submarine underneath the ice, which is really weird. So what this is saying is, yeah, I see. So this is why the relief plot here is showing up at the northern end. Yeah, okay. Is there any, I mean, should we fix that in some way?
I don't think so. I think we have bathymetry data for the ocean, so I think
I understand that. My question is, if you wanted to know, what the actual solid surface of the Earth was. I mean, it's the only place on the Earth, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I don't know. If there's a frozen lake, I guess you have the same issue. I wonder if anybody has that data. Okay, that's a separate thing, not relevant to this. Okay, but so there's nothing wrong with geo-elevation data at the poles.
Mm-hmm. No.
Okay, how does that work again? I mean, you just told me that there's that it's in lat long bins, and this is a discontinuity in the lat long bins.
Well, we need to make sure that all values at latitude 90 for all longitudes coincide.
I see what you're saying. Okay, fine. So, I mean, if I were to say 10 degrees here, you'd get these, what?
Well, they should coincide. If the data, we haven't modified the data, but,
okay,
but
well,
they should coincide.
Just for my entertainment value, if I were to take this N, let's just see what it looks like. I mean, let's say in 5-degree increments or something, N goes from, so where should it go? 0 to 180? Is that right?
Minus 180 to 180.
Okay. Can I do this more efficiently than the way I'm doing it?
Yes, you can put geo-elevation data of the geoposition of the table, and it will go in one go.
Okay, well, let's just see what this is looking like. So this is a little weird, if I might say so.
Yes, I think at some point we have known that there is you see, it's not a very large difference, but it's how the data comes.
Right. But so this is, I see, because probably what happened is this data was not taken right at the North Pole.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I wonder whether the same is true at the South Pole. I wonder whether it also has this weirdness, or whether the South Pole, I mean, I have no idea what the, oops. It is always funny when people say there's this discontinuity in the coordinate systems at the North and South Pole, and people say, oh, that's, who cares? This is one of the who cares moments for that.
Recently, I saw
GPS cares.
Only if you're at the North or South Pole.
Yeah,
for a long time. I mean, like
opens.
What's that?
If the Northwest Passage opens to shipping, they worry about it a lot.
How close does it get to?
I actually got that from one of our conference attendees, Thomas, was it Meyer?
Oh, okay. A geodesist, right?
Yes.
I recently saw a video of somebody who claimed had found a motorway under the sea, because and the point is that the data had, and this is in Google data, they had a discontinuity at the dateline at longitude 180 from pole to pole. And he was convinced this was an alien road or something like that. And the video has millions of views.
Great. Okay. Okay, but seriously, do we have any idea what's going on here? Why as a...
I think I knew this at some point. It may be that the data we have are pixels, are center pixels. Mm-hmm. And so we are computing the value at the pole, calling the closest pixel value, center pixel. So the data actually is a bit off the pole.
Right. Okay. So look, there's clearly some weird issue with poles, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
I hate this idea, by the way, of having a fake missing value to avoid unpacking. I think it's an incredible hack. And I think instead we should investigate, particularly with all the new work that's been done on underflow and so on, the possibility of maintaining packing even when there's a missing there. Who is involved in that issue? Is that Mark and people?
It would be Mark and Rob, I guess. Yes.
Well,
so we have had similar issues with errors. For example, how do you mark not just a missing, but a generic error?
Yeah, well, I know. I think what should happen is there should be a way of setting in a packed system. There should be a way of setting a NaN-like thing, and then having some kind of table of, the NaN at position such and such corresponds to such and such, like a sparse array kind of, side table.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think we should do. And I think, I would raise that point rather than adding a hack here. But look, in terms of geo-image, geo-range seems like an obviously useful thing and fairly uncontroversial. Is that a true statement?
Yes, if we take this new point of view of allowing the same generality that we allow in GeoImage, because GeoImage uses the first argument in a different way. So in GeoElevation data, we put 2 corners, while in GeoImage, we can place anything, an entity, a polygon.
Sorry, wait. GeoImage, you can have an arbitrary entity. So for example, if I say GeoImage of New York City, for instance, am I going to get a GeoImage of the whole of New York City? Why is it so slow? What on earth is it doing? There we go. Anybody know New York City well enough to know that's Manhattan? I know that. Is this everything, including various boroughs and so on, or is it incorrect?
Yeah, it looks pretty complete. Well,
but is it too big, or is it about the right size?
It's mostly right, I think.
You can use geographics of the polygon of New York City, and we see the polygon we are using.
Okay.
I mean, you've got a little bit to the upper left that you don't want, but...
Yeah, but you can't avoid that because... Right, it has to be a square.
Yeah, so it looks about right.
Danny, you probably want to mute because you've got background.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it does looks perfect. Right, it's using that polygon to find the nearest enclosing square.
Right.
Okay, so I had not really internalized that GeoImage can deal with projections, and that then it is simply using. So you're saying it will have a background option, which is the visual pixels to use outside of the region defined by the projection, right?
Yes, because that's what all other image functions do.
Yeah, and it's the right thing for this to do. Okay, so the question is there any other data function that can have, that can have a function that returns an array like GeoElevation data does? What does it do when things are missing?
Nothing. They fail, I think. This has been an issue for quantity array, for example, because sometimes one value is missing. And then quantity array is unhappy.
That's no good.
So this issue of the not having a way of representing errors in packing is known. And
okay, fine. So we probably need to deal with that. But in the short term, by the way, have we even considered? I hate to bring this up, but random asteroids and things that aren't spherical.
We have the ability of adding them to GeoModel, and we have, for some of them, we have data about the radius.
As a function of lat long. Is it obvious? So these things are like homeomorphic to spheres or something. So you can you can parameterize them with lat long. Yes, there's no.
Yes, but we don't have we don't have those functions. The most we have is 3 values for the 3 axes of an ellipsoidal approximation.
I see. But in principle, the way to represent, a potato-shaped object is instead of, in addition to giving theta phi uniquely, on the Earth, theta phi, determines R. And how do we generate? If you want to know the distance from the center of the Earth to a particular lat long, we can get that from get that from the geodesy data, yes?
Yes, and actually GeoElevation data has a second argument which specifies the type of elevation you want, and one of them is that one. It gives you the distance from the center of the Earth.
Okay, fine.
Taking into account the ellipsoidal shape.
Right. I mean, the issue is that the projections, I'm sorry, this is probably an irrelevant thing, but I mean, if you have a potato-shaped object, the Lambert azimuthal projection is perfectly meaningful because it's simply a transformation in theta phi space, isn't it?
Well, most projections are designed for spherical models, and some of them have formulas for ellipsoidal models, assuming an ellipsoid of revolution.
Right, but isn't it the case? I mean, if you were to look, if I want to take Deimos or whatever it is, and I want to, and I want to show the Lambert azimuthal projection of it, isn't it the case that I simply have to map in theta phi space the, where I draw theta equals such and such on my final picture? Was that not correct?
Well, if you do that, you would be first taking some sort of spherical projection.
Yeah. First you're puffing out from the center of the thing and
exactly,
and projecting it out onto a sphere.
Exactly.
I see.
But with the projections, you want some sort of realistic map of the local area, and you would lose.
Yeah. Right. So the area is wrong. So
exactly.
you take something, if it was very close to the center of the sphere, if there was a big depression in the asteroid or whatever, then by the time it's projected out to the sphere, it will be much bigger and its area will be wrong. Okay, exactly. I get it. Okay, so what is the point? What do we think we will use geoelevation data in a non equirectangular projection for?
Well, because, for example, somebody wants elevation profile of a local area, and it's quite to the north, where the equirectangular projection distorts a lot.
I see the elevation profile. So you say, I want to look at the the profile of the mountains in Greenland or something,
right?
And if it isn't aligned with the lines of latitude, you claim it's going to be bizarrely distorted.
Yes. So, for example, take a map of an equirectangular projection of a city which is very north, and you will see that what should be rectangles in the streets are really, really badly distorted.
I mean, there's that lovely place that I visited a couple of years ago. Let's see. Is that far enough north? It's like 78 degrees north, though, right?
Absolutely.
Is this far enough north that you'll see this phenomenon?
Sure. But this is going to be a Mercator projection. So now do equirectangular. The projection goes to equirectangular, and you will see how much this map is distorted.
Sorry, say that again. Do this for what?
Yes, so do the same thing, but now geoprojection goes to equirectangular.
Oh, wow.
You see? So if we did a profile, a geoelevation data profile, we would get the lower shape, while we want the upper shape, which is the real one.
I see. But so most projections, so Mercator and equirectangular both map squares to squares. It's not square. I mean, sorry, rectangles to rectangles. Is that true?
Yes, but distorting in the process a lot the shape.
No,
in equirectangular.
But in terms of whether you end up with a pixel array or a proper rectangular array, those will both respect rectangularity. Whereas something like, what is the property of a projection that causes it to respect rectangularity? Is it angle preserving? What's that?
Cylindrical projection. Well, there is also the concept of conformal projection, which is rectangularity in all directions.
Yes, but that's more than requiring rectangularity in the coordinate directions.
Yes, that's just cylindrical.
So okay, so of the projections, if I say geoprojection data, how do I find out which ones are cylindrical?
That's right, cylindrical.
Okay, so there's a bunch of them that are cylindrical. And for these, there is no problem in mapping. Okay, so the issue is for ones other than this, what to do. Okay, you're convincing me that there's a reason. I mean, the geoelevation data, okay, the issue is geographics with geo background goes to relief map gives the pixelized version of geoelevation data with geoprojection arrow, whatever, correct?
Yes, it does it by first bringing the equirectangular data and then constructing an image and projecting it.
Right.
So what we will be able to do with geoelevation data with a projection is bringing the data already with that projection and then constructing.
I get it. But I'm trying to understand for the analogy. In that case, the background is determined like it is in images just by a background option and will otherwise be kind of white or something, right?
Yes, exactly.
In the case of geographics, the question of let me see. So the issue that you're trying to figure out is the analogy between geo-elevation data when the projection is undefined, when in particular, because geo-elevation data returns a rectangular array, there will be elements of that rectangular array that correspond to things which are not defined parts of the projection. Right?
Correct. Yes, exactly.
Humph. And what do you want to do? You want to just have what we could do as a kind of hack, I have to say, is to actually have a background option. Maybe this is what you were proposing, is to have a background option for geo-elevation data, which for the time being, you could just set to something like 0. But perhaps what we could do is to set it to automatic. And in the future, when we can actually support missing, we could have it turn into missing instead.
Right. Yes. So I was thinking that because background always goes to a color, something graphical rather than a quantity, we would require a new name, like we have missing style, also to interpret what is a style that is missing.
So what are you proposing then?
Something like missing value, or
don't we have something? I mean, by the way, does this work in a different projection, or does dynamic graphics work in another projection, or does dynamic graphics only work in
only Mercator and equirectangular, because those are the two ones for which we have the tiles pre-processed. So in dynamic geographics, we don't want to lose time projecting.
So you can't really. Okay. So what did it just do by default here? This is
Mercator. So by default, it's always Mercator at every scale. If you do dynamic geographics, your projection goes to equirectangular, you will see how distorted this looks. So this is the real view, the actual correct view, because Mercator is conformal.
I see. But so if I do this in equirectangular, then it will be completely wrong.
Yes.
It was clever of old Mercator to actually get a conformal projection back when he did. Maybe it was obvious at the time that you could do that, but why can't I resize this? Help.
Yeah, this is Brett. We have seen that sometimes. It's a front-end thing.
Oh, okay. But you're saying that this, I see, that's bizarrely misshapen. So we could, in principle, generate tiles. We could pre-generate tiles for some other projection, but we have not done so because nobody seems to care. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it's very expensive to keep a full set, because when we go to deeper zooms,
yeah, I understand. We're not keeping a full set, are we? We're allowing. I mean, we're dynamically generating these when we go to zoom level 14 or something.
Exactly. We have up until zoom 13 pre-generated, and then we generate them. But already zoom 13 is a lot.
Yeah, I understand. And also, I suspect nobody cares.
Right, because in general, for a single image in geographics, we can project in real time.
Right. Okay, look, I don't know what to do with this background option. I would just put it in as a ordinary background option for the time being. I mean, this thing is a hack.
Okay.
And we've had some interesting comments on the live stream. Let's take a look at those before we have to wrap up here. Phillips, it would be very nice if geographics had the same sort of click tools that images, volumes, etc. have. Yes, it would be, wouldn't it? Yes.
Well, it has some. So if you click the image and then period.
What? I click the image and then I press the period.
Exactly.
My God, I had no idea.
You move the cursor and you get that.
How would anybody ever figure out that that's there? I certainly didn't know that was there. Well, how do I copy those numbers?
You click to get a position, and then I think you have to click outside and do Control-C. This is the coordinate tools. This is the generic coordinate tools of graphics that...
But why doesn't it come up? I don't understand. Why doesn't it come up with a because graphics, okay. So we don't have the attached cell for graphics here. Unlike if I did, how do I get a random image? Well, if I say
random image,
whatever. Okay, but here I will get explicit tools, and then I have the explicit coordinate tool, right? So why aren't we at least putting that attached thing? If we have that working, why aren't we at least putting that as an attached cell element, even if there aren't other things like cropping and so on, which does not so obvious we need to support?
Well, if geographics follows graphics, so whatever graphics does.
No, I understand, but I'm asking the question even for graphics, which is kind of I haven't thought of before. I mean, does graphics support the same thing? My gosh, we probably had this for 20 years and I didn't know it. Yeah, well, arguably, the way we should do that, and this is a thing, who's PMing here? Is it Sushma?
Yep.
I think that's a thing for the user assistance meeting, okay? And what I'm suggesting is that we at least give that piece of the attached cell, right? Since we can support it. Why not just, even if we, there are more elaborate parts of the attached cell that we could give, that's at least some discovery interface for that feature, which otherwise has absolutely no discovery interface. I mean, ultimately, we probably want the full drawing tools. I mean, I don't quite know. I mean, that's been this project for a while to slim down the drawing tools so that we can actually have them as an attached cell on graphics. Okay, lat long rather than pixel coordinates. Yes, getting distances in here. Yeah, well, that's not so simple, is it? I mean, in other words, if you have 2 points here, knowing their distance, I mean, getting out those 2 points and doing geo distance is a reasonable thing to do, but the line, the geodesic on here is certainly not a straight line.
Right. Yes, the straight lines in Mercator are so-called loxodrums.
Yeah, so Flip also wants elevation interactively, which probably we could do.
Yes, that we could do.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see, some distance measurements, annotation tools for, look, we want to do this for general. I mean, we've had drawing tools for a long time, but it's just not been, they've never, I don't know, I always find them too hard to use, even though we've definitely simplified them over the years. And I also think, I mean, look, there's no good reason, and this is something else for the user assistance meeting, there's no good reason that we shouldn't have a tab down here along with the coordinate tool that will allow one to at least, in fact, that is the coordinate tool, isn't it? Yes, that is the coordinate tool. So what we should be doing is at least having some attached tabs here that, number one, bring up the coordinate tool, and number two, actually bring up the drawing tools palette. Why not? Even if, even the existing drawing tools palette. But what we really want is a better designed inline drawing tools palette that goes underneath. Yes, zoom and pan for graphics. We're aware of that issue. Distance measurement. Okay, graphics might support the, yes. Okay, so let's see, was there anything else here on the, we might just get, the next one is very simple, so I think we might just do it. But this particular thing with, okay, so the action items from here are, let's implement geo-range and so on for geo-elevation data. That seems harmless enough. Don't we have some other things like that, like geogravity data? Geogravity model data, doesn't it bring back the same kind of thing?
Yes, eventually, yes. They also take a rectangular region. They could also be generalized in the same way. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's hardly the most urgent thing, but it seems like a desirable thing and probably the same code path. But Okay, so that's first thing, and then with a background option, which is a hack, and we should consider it experimental for now, that allows one to fill in what. You're right, it isn't the right name. I mean, it's maybe it's background value or something. What is the analogous thing in sparse array? It doesn't have an option name, does it? It's just an argument.
Exactly, it's an argument, and we call it the background value.
Background value? Well, maybe we should just call it background value then. All right, fair enough. Okay, let's consider it. Look, we can put it in as an option and tag it as experimental background value for geoelevation data. But now the question, let's see. Okay, so the other issue was the horrors of the North and South Pole.
Yes. So there I have an idea, which is that recently I have extended the geographic so that it's able to interact with a geoserver in which the tiles are in a polar projection, which is the right thing to do here. So we have something circular for the poles, and then we take the tiles from there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's going to solve this problem.
Okay, great. So then the North and South Pole will be perfect. And we have the imagery, right? We have satellite imagery from those areas.
That we don't. Because typically, because all these maps that you see in the internet are all Mercator maps, they don't care about what's.
Why don't we ask a satellite image provider for that? I bet they have it, unless their satellites don't orbit there. I mean, I don't know whether their LEO satellites do they. Okay, celestial mechanics question. Yeah, they must not, because I remember like the Iridium phone coverage doesn't include the Antarctic, for instance, or didn't until recently include the Antarctic. So I'm guessing that you can have, is that right? That you can have an LEO satellite that does not ergodic relative to the points on the Earth. I've certainly seen those plots where they don't. I'm a little confused, but maybe they simply have not had satellites there. But I'm sure they have that data. We should just ask them.
Yeah. I'm sure that there is. It's just that it's less readily available.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we only have to get it once. I don't think we're not going to need to replace the South Pole tile very quickly. Okay, super quickly here. Completely different topic. Numerator denominator. That seems like a no-brainer.
Okay, just want to.
I mean, and it will return a list. So it will simply be a list of the numerator and the denominator, like we have quotient mod, for example, quotient remainder.
Yes. Yes, or ream.
Fine. Seems sensible. Danny, do you have any objection to that? Do you think it's stupid for some reason?
No, I have no objection.
Okay, all right, we should wrap it up. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks to everybody on the live stream. Thank you all for your suggestions, and hopefully flattened. Did we come up with flattened in? Yes, I think that was where we ended up. Maybe we'll come up with something more brilliant for that.